Welcome to the chaos sector. We return to the matrix. Well, it seems undecided voters have voiced their opinions on the major networks. One woman stated, paraphrasing, she stated that Harris proposes she will fix the problems, which she is partly responsible for, and she felt it's not worth the risk. In other words, her bank account has taken a hit, gas prices skyrocketing, a lot of problems that the average citizen is dealing with. And let's touch on that for a moment, because ABC would not address that due to protecting Princess Kamala. First, we focus on the average worker in America. You have rent, of course, which varies per state. You have groceries, light bill, gas bill, some may pay water bills, cell phone bill, car insurance, gas money for transportation, and miscellaneous expenses that add to the total monthly tab. Now let's give a more specific working class with those expenses. A single person who is a supervisor at a grocery store makes $20 an hour at about 35 hours a week with a bi-weekly paycheck. Okay, now this is approximately $1,400 bi-weekly and $2,800 a month. Not bad at all for a single person, right? Yet let's crunch the numbers. They have a one-bedroom apartment for about $1,200 a month. Okay, we subtract that from the monthly income, the biggest expense one has. Now you're down to $1,600 left in the month. Then you have the secondary expenses, groceries, transportation, car insurance, and utility bills. Groceries is about $200 a month. This person has a lease on their vehicle, which is approximately $150 to $200 a month, and car insurance, which is approximately $150 a month. Then you have utility bills, such as the light bill, which is approximately $100 to $150 a month, a water bill, approximately $50 a month. We'll leave the gas out of the equation, and a cell phone bill, approximately $75 to $100 a month. And this, my friends, totals to about $800 in secondary expenses. Subtract this from the remaining savings, and you have about $850. Okay, this person is still in good shape, considering, right? But not so fast. We don't need an economist to explain this. It's simple. You have to also include taxes on everything, including federal taxes from their income. So instead of $850 remaining, it's more like $600 remaining. Well, with $600 remaining after all expenses are paid in that month, well, it is money, of course, but based on financial stability, not being a guarantee in the course of one's life and career, $600 is not sufficient in the bigger picture. Not economists, but just using common dollar sense. There are 3 levels of financial stability, in my opinion. You have green, yellow, and red. For the average single person, you need approximately $5,000 to $10,000 in savings to be considered financially secure. In other words, this is the basic financial state in case an emergency arises. Laid off from work, medical emergency, transportation issues, etc. You have to be able to keep your head above water until things get better. And that's what that range of saving will provide. For a single person, of course. That's green, in which you are capable of covering cost of misfortunes. But also, if everything is working out just fine, you can build on that saving, which increases your financial stability. Then you have yellow. This is where a lot of workers are right now. Yellow is ranging from $1,000 to $5,000 in savings. You might be able to cover some cost, but if you step on a twig, everything will break. $1,000 can disappear in the blink of an eye, especially if you're dealing with unfortunate circumstances. It's best to avoid this range if possible, because you start to watch your bank account more due to anxiety. Then you have red, a very stressful situation to be in financially. This ranges from $100 to $500 in savings. This usually disappears due to financial hardships. Even if there isn't a major setback, most can't budget such a small amount of money because it's within the spectrum of a spending amount, and there are entirely too many temptations out here. From fast food, clothing, you name it. Some of that will get spent. Regardless if the person is working and making money, they will have to stop spending to build that back up to yellow. Now, if we're just talking about savings in general, there are 4 levels. Green would range from $20,000 or more in savings, yellow would range from $5,000 to $10,000, orange would range from $1,000 to $5,000, and red would range from $500 to $1,000. Some may agree, some may disagree, but what we should all agree on is that a sound amount of savings starts around $10,000. Now, we're not even going to break down single-parent households and families. I mean, you just multiply the expenses at least by 2 and calculate the expenses. The reason I broke this down is because inflation has put a major burden on the average American worker, as they are finding it harder to save and budget their monthly income and spending. Having a checking account and a savings account used to be the ideal method of budgeting money. You were able to pay your bills with your checking account and save money with your savings account. Heck, even save money from your checking account as well. And you were able to build significant interest in both accounts, which adds more financial stability each year. Some are still in pretty good shape these days. But due to inflation, many people are dipping into their savings accounts because prices have gone up on virtually everything. And this problem is compounded by the fact that American citizens are in fact losing their jobs, some to illegal or legal migrants, and even losing government assistance as well. So if you have high levels of inflation, which raises prices on everything, and citizens are losing their jobs, what do you expect to be the outcome of this disaster? The only thing that can be offered, which gives them some breathing room, is unemployment benefits. Housing benefits have been essentially redirected to housing immigrants, and also benefits such as food and medical aid. Once again, Kamala Harris has to own her role in passing the Inflation Reduction Act, which has been coined the Inflation Explosion Act by Republicans. So in that bill, it was projected to raise $738 billion, but authorized $391 billion of actual federal spending to climax change. Yes, I said climax change. The reason we often mispronounce terms is because we do not like having context tabs on our episodes. Climax stands for climate, plandemic stands for that one should be obvious, and clovervirus stands for you get the point. Anywho, $391 billion was spent on this issue, which Harris stood right next to old Joe and agreed with that spending. She could have done something useful as vice president and rejected that bill. Mind you, Harris set a record for having the most tie-breaking votes in Congress, which means her signature was the deciding factor on almost everything that went through. So she showed poor judgment, perhaps didn't truly grasp the economic consequences of such a bill, due to not really understanding how the economy works, but at least she has the mental capacity to understand that the American people are struggling, regardless if she's financially savvy. I would tend to think, when the bill was presented to her and she saw $391 billion in climax, Harris should have said, maybe we should slice a bit of fat off the meat and allocate some of this spending to help states rebuild their cities. Roads need repairing, community centers are closing down. Let's help the American people revitalize their communities. Yeah, a very strong position in Congress, and guess what? She could have made it happen as vice president, being the second most powerful person in the nation. But what do you expect with corrupt politicians? Speaking of that $391 billion, I guess old Joe is starting to snitch on the Democrats, that a boy be the grumpy old man who's seeking revenge. Get a load of this. Biden says Inflation Reduction Act was about climax change. Quote, we should have named it what it was, unquote. And there is a video, of course. We're not able to retrieve this content for some reason. A bit of shadow banning, nothing new. But this is basically old Joe admitting that the Inflation Reduction Act was merely nothing more than a puffed up bill, swishing money around, disguised as somehow reducing inflation. Think about the title of it, Inflation Reduction Act. What inflation existed when old Joe and Harris took office? Inflation was around 1.9% when old Joe arrived. And he flat out lied to the American people, claiming when he and Harris arrived, inflation was at 9%. Now put all of this into perspective. Old Joe admits that $391 billion was basically for climax change, but naming the bill Inflation Reduction Act, yet inflation was very low. What the hell are they doing? They lied to the American people, misrepresented a bill, naming it inflation reduction, when there wasn't much inflation to reduce, spends $391 billion and projected to spend a total of $738 billion towards climax change, which only led to temporary federal government jobs in that field. And guess what the Inflation Reduction Act did? Well, just ask the average American citizen what it did, increased inflation. How's that for irony? It wasn't old Joe, he did not agree with that bill, but he had no choice, because he, like Harris, was willing to sacrifice his integrity for the highest seat of power. Harris is in a bit of trouble, though, because if old Joe continues to leak out these truths about his administration, she may end up having to answer some very tough questions in a future interview or even presidential debate. If old Joe knew what it was, then Harris also knew what it was. She was complicit with deceiving the American people, just like old Joe did. So it seems Bernie Lomax isn't the walking dead after all, hey? Harris can't jump off the ship just yet, because old Joe has her handcuffed to his hand. We're going down together, my lovely princess. I think old Joe is seeking revenge, and Democrats can't do anything about it, because he's about to retire in a few months anyway. Take that, you swindling cowards.
And then there's more. Not sure if he's been rebelling and not taking his daily meds, or he's staying up too late, but, seems old Joe is foreshadowing what's to come. Look at this. Well, old Joe is wearing a Trump hat. Now, of course, the reason given for this is a Trump supporter asked him to wear it, and this was during the 9/11 ceremonial event. Okay, wanted to show a bit of unity for the ceremony, but think about what this does symbolically for Kamala Harris. Here she is debating Trump as old Joe's vice president, and her boss is wearing a Trump hat. I know many think this was based on the moment, but I think it was a subliminal attack against Harris and the rest of the Democrats that wanted him out. Basically saying, I'm supporting Trump for president, because I actually like the crazy guy, to be honest. If you examine their debates, it was like two elderly cousins arguing about who has a better golf swing. Old Joe doesn't care anymore. He has nothing to lose. Why not spill the beans? But guess who had a problem with this issue? Charlemagne the dog. He gave old Joe a donkey of the day for wearing the Trump hat. Oh, okay, so old Joe is a jackass for wearing a Trump hat, but you didn't call him a jackass when you interviewed him and said this.
More questions.
You got more questions, but I tell you, if you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, then you ain't black.
It don't have nothing to do with Trump.
So, you let him insult the black community by saying individuals who wouldn't vote for him aren't black people, and you never called him a jackass for that statement? Wouldn't that be the perfect description of old Joe for making such a statement? I mean, we know you'll never call a Democrat a racist, but at least you should have called him a jackass, right? Oh, let me guess. Now that he's out of the picture, you have the courage to scrutinize him for showing unity at a ceremony. See, he knows what that photo represented. It represented an old career politician who has decided to have a moment of respect for his political opponent. He doesn't have to pretend Trump is racist anymore. He's free now, and the real Joe Biden finally revealed himself. Fitting that it came at the end of his political career. Go figure. But Charlemagne the dog is, of course, executing damage control, trying to take away from that unifying moment. How disgusting. And why is his voice so important anyway? He doesn't speak for the black community. He's a shock jock personality, nothing more. I'm sick of these so-called part-time political analysts and activists who skate around sowing seeds of division on social media. Yeah, he's agitated me that quick. While we're at it, let's talk about this individual a moment. Now, apparently, he is voting for Kamala Harris. For someone who is always yapping about what a politician will do for the black community, what exactly has Harris shown that indicates she will do anything for the black community? He stated that old Joe was losing black support, but there was a woman of color right along with him. So are we to suggest that Harris didn't have any influence of policies regarding the black community? Well, if Charlemagne is voting for Harris, based on what he assumes she will do, how are you detaching her from being a part of the very administration as vice president, which you claim was losing black support? And he knows that Kamala Harris was selected as the vice president based on black votes matter, basically giving him an ultimatum for the black vote. But even still, she is the vice president who didn't propose any policy or bill for the black community, signed off on executive orders for illegal immigrants. Yet this bozo is trying to detach her from old Joe's administration, when that decreased black support for old Joe also was for Harris as well. So how do you turn around and support a woman of color who had the opportunity to do for the black community, but chose to support executive orders for people who aren't even citizens of the fucking country? How can you expect a politician to do for the black community when you didn't hold a woman of color as vice president accountable? Oh, you want the old white guy to be responsible, never mind the woman of color standing beside him. He's alluding to seeking reparations. Yet again, that woman of color was in the best position to make something happen, yet she did nothing. Heck, even Obama stated it was unrealistic. He didn't even attempt to venture into in-depth discussions about it. Yet these same Democrats are always yapping about racism. Make the racists pay then, right? get civil justice and financial justice as well, right? Negative. They know that if that actually happened, they can't hold the victim's stigma over their heads anymore, which impacts the voting base. So yeah, Democrats need racism to exist so they can keep the black community coming back to vote for them. Unfortunately, they do it. It's people like this clown who are major influences as well. Basically saying that old Joe wearing a Trump hat is supporting a racist, yet wouldn't call old Joe a racist for insulting the black community, which happened several times, by the way, because he's a Democrat. So you see this as old Joe becoming a Republican, therefore he aligns with a racist. Democrats can't be racist, regardless of what they say or do, right, Charlemagne the dog? By that metric, racism is not real. You see, he just blabbers incoherently, another celebrity bird brain, using his platform to influence others to vote for a candidate based on identity politics. In the words of old Joe, my friend.
And you ain't black.
You, sir, get the donkey of the day. No, scratch that. You've been a donkey your entire career. Do us all a favor and stick to your radio show and interview other bird brain celebrities. You all make yourselves look like complete jackasses voicing your opinions about politics. If you're not going to be honest with your audience about politics, then zip it. Oh wait, he has that in common with politicians, so I guess he fits right in.
Great take. It's one thing to be a novice when it comes to politics, learning as you go, figuring out the inner workings of how it all goes, that's fine. But someone like Charlemagne the dog knows how things go, and he intentionally causes controversy politically, which is basically a distraction. But let's get back to the issue at hand. You see, he was a distraction. He did exactly what he set out to do. Old Joe is about to snitch on his colleagues because they have gotten out of control. Being a moderate, he's seen his once respected party turn into a damn insane asylum. Although he went along with it, naturally he raised his eyebrows at how Democrats have behaved over the last 10 years or so. I wouldn't be surprised if he is interviewed and actually shows more respect for Trump, which would obviously anger Pelosi and Schumer. And just like Harris betrayed him by plotting and scheming behind his back, old Joe will betray Harris and the Democrats, have an interview spilling the beans, and then he'll go back to his hometown without a care in the world. Trump said it best, although old Joe was a horrible president, he didn't deserve to be stabbed in the back. Everyone knows Democrats executed a coup against him, and the person next to him was the worst, because she pretended to appreciate being in old Joe's administration, laughing hysterically, presenting a bubbly personality to the nation. But in reality, she was only thinking of herself, going to the secret meetings with the Democrat elites behind his back, trying to obtain power by any means necessary. Well, it seems her entire political career has been this way, an opportunist. Old Joe might be old, he might be a bit out of it, but he knows the truth, and see, that is what may leak out. That photo will open Pandora's box, and Harris will have to explain what the hell is in it. We've said it time and time again, she was the most dangerous person in that administration, just like her potential vice president in Tim Walz would be the most dangerous person in her administration. Starting to see a pattern here. Might have to go back and take another look at former vice presidents. Hey, they had a trick up their sleeve. The problem, though, is the trick was revealed before they had a chance to fool anyone. As the saying goes, tricks are for kids, not hardworking American citizens. This is the chaos sector.